Hey, David.
Hello. I think I'm really impressed. No one in all the meetings in the last 2 years has ever asked me why I have a road sign in my room.
It was more the power rack that interested me, to be honest.
Oh, but that's I have the most famous gym of lockdown within Dynatrace.
What? No, what? Okay, this is a story I don't know about. I need to hear it. Why is the gym so famous?
Oh, because I did over the last almost 2 years the open source talks within Dynatrace, and like having 200 people connected, you would see the
See the power rack?
in the back what room is that? I was like, it's where I do my hard work.
Someone called out power
Nice.
play.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Hey everyone. Morning, Pete. Good afternoon, Ben, Thomas. Good to see you guys. Just a reminder, if you have any topics, feel free to dump them in the meeting notes here. I'll just wait a minute or two and go ahead and kick it off.
Hey, I've got a question. When if I think of a topic like ahead of time, am I supposed to put it in the open items, or is there a different place to put it?
Just throw it in the agenda, just
Okay.
anywhere, and usually just add your name at the beginning. Makes it easy because I can make sure I can call on you.
Okay.
Good to go.
Yeah, I usually, not always, it depends on sometimes on my forgetfulness, but usually I create the let's say the agenda slot for the next meeting at least a week in advance.
Got it. Okay.
But yeah, if it isn't there, feel free to copy and paste, and
Yeah,
there's not much magic to it.
it's kind of funny. It's one of those things that is presumably pretty straightforward, but I'm like, I don't know if am I allowed to touch this? Am I allowed to copy paste?
Maybe we should be add a little snippet or something above and just say like, I don't know, add your agenda items if you want. So, because yeah, I feel like we get people to add it during the meetings, but not necessarily ahead of time. So maybe there is some hesitation there. So cool. If you don't mind, just add your name to the participants list on there. And then I suppose we can probably just go ahead and get going. Sky, you still good to do scribe work today? Perfect, thank you. Any volunteers for scribe work next time?
That's
Thank you,
a
Pete.
question I would have asked because it's during KubeCon.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Should we, I mean, I don't know if I'll be able to be there. I think Todd will also not be able to be there, very likely, given the timing. I think the booth actually opens at 10:30 on a Thursday, or on the Thursday that week. So we can either
do like a live edition, like from the conference.
from the booth. I don't know. Maybe. So I guess we have a couple options. We can try to make something work. We could move it to the week after, or we could just kind of cancel it that week and just do something kind of a recap at our normal schedule the week 2 weeks later. So I don't know.
Maybe we
What do
can still make it work. We just have one person that stays and covers the booth, and
Okay, let's try to make it work. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to provide an update. It would be a Thursday into KubeCon, so we'd already have a few days there, and hopefully some updates and feedback from the attendees there. So that sounds good. So Pete, we'll pencil you in there, unless you decide to come to KubeCon. Last minute tickets are only like $1,800.
Yeah, I'll ask my boss. Oh no, he said no.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Perfect. Morning, Justin. All right. So I guess the first topic is KubeCon. Just a reminder, I hate to keep teasing it, especially for those that aren't attending, but I do have like a quick sign up form there. So make sure that you add yourself. I'm also wondering if maybe we just want to create a Slack channel for those that will be attending, so it's easier to communicate, and then we just archive it when we're done. I think that really only applies to a couple people on the call. So if you think that's a good idea, I guess let me know. It'd be easy enough to do, and we can go ahead and create it and then archive it. And then the last thing, real quick, if you missed my message in the Slack channel, if you are going to be at KubeCon, there's a Cube cruise, which is on the Detroit River, and it looks like it should be nice. I would definitely recommend dressing warmly. Detroit in end of October could either be beautiful or snowing. So yeah, pack and plan accordingly. Next thing is just the demo application update. So we kind of teased it at the last community meeting, but now that work is essentially finished. If you haven't already, definitely check out the Playground repo. It basically is a fully, self-contained like Docker Compose files now, and you can just run Docker Compose. It comes with the environment variable, the flag D, and Go feature flag out of the box. And then if you register any vendor, you can just add that their access key as an environment variable, and it will show up in the list, and you can just select it. And then I tried to make it, update the README to show how to set up each of the different vendors, and then have like a little, marketing blurb for each vendor on kind of what their value prop is. There's also kind of a story around why Fiber decides that they want to use feature flags and what the value is there. So if you have any feedback on that, certainly let me know. There is a few, like I would say, remaining tasks around like talking about the OpenTelemetry integration and a few other things, but the basics are all in place. And so yeah, definitely take a look, let me know. And appreciate Todd's help making it look a little bit nicer. It's certainly still like, I don't think Fiber's going to make a ton of money here, but it does look a little bit a little bit nicer. Yeah, so that's definitely worth checking out. Another thing that's kind of cool, there was a community member that helped work on a killer Coda demo. It's something that I was not familiar with, but it was a kind of a cool tool that basically spins up an environment for you in your browser, and then starts like the repo automatically and just exposes all the ports and stuff like that. So basically, as long as you have an account, which you can link to your GitHub account or something, it spins up the demo and just exposes the ports, and you can start playing with it without having to pay for infrastructure. No idea how they're going to stay in business, but I guess we'll just rip through their venture capitalist money until they run out, and we'll pivot. So pretty cool. Definitely check it out if we want to add more demos, scenarios, whatever. This may be a cool spot to do it. It looks really simple to add stuff, and there is a repo in our org now for just adding new scenarios. So take a look. But I think it has some opportunities, and I was definitely impressed when I went through it for the first time, because it just kind of works. So you don't have to mess around with even having like Docker and stuff set up on your computer. So kind of cool. Any questions or feedback on any of those? And then next one is just a really quick OTel update. This is the pull request that will never get approved. It feels like it's been open since like beginning of the year. It has gained a little bit of traction recently, just based on we do have 4 approvals, which is technically sufficient, but there's a few people in the OTel community that's a bit concerned about using spans versus events versus attaching it to an existing span. I've experimented with different versions of that, so it's kind of on me now to lay out the pros and cons of all the different approaches. I'm leaning towards an event at this point, but I just need to kind of spell it out, and I'll probably provide the different options maybe in the demo environment, so we can see them all side by side, and hopefully get some kind of approval. I think most people in the OTel community are okay with something. There's just not been people accepting the existing approach unanimously, I suppose. So that's kind of the current state. I'm really hoping we can get something. Worst case, I have some conversations at KubeCon with the team and just see what we can do here, because I think it shouldn't have been that controversial. So I'm hoping we can get something in soon. Next thing, I'm not even sure if most people even realize this was an issue, but there was an issue with our org where GitHub pages weren't working. It was trying to use openfeature.dev and not working properly. So any kind of like repo specific GitHub page was not loading. that has been resolved. It was a very bizarre issue. It took me a lot of time, but we're good to go. Quick summary in case you're ever managing a GitHub org. If you have a, what is it? In our case, it was like an OpenFeature.github.io repo. In our case, it was archived even. And then that was set up with a GitHub page. It messed up all of the other repos. So I had to rip out that configuration from that archived repo, and everything worked as intended. So all good there. The way you can see, I guess, the result of that is in our JS repo. We're publishing like the like a automatic like TypeScript generated page, so you can kind of view all of the public methods and interfaces and things like that. I can pull that up. I'll link it in the chat in a few minutes, because I think that's basically the last topic that I have on the list right now. So if there's no questions about any of those, I can hand it off to Sky. Nothing? Cool.
No.
Sky, go ahead, please.
So a week or so ago, Ryan Lamb raised an issue in the .NET SDK with concerns of thread safety, specifically around the evaluation context, which he had found to be mutable, which was concerning because, say, if someone were to create an evaluation context object, pass it to a flag evaluation, and then mutate it in some other thread somewhere, then this could have undesirable consequences, obviously. So this then led to investigating whether this was an issue in other places, and we found that it was in the Go SDK and the Java SDK as well, I believe. So breaking changes were needed, and the way this was resolved was to create a, well, in the Go case at least, to create a constructor, and that effectively means that the structure is immutable now. And we also added in some locks at the client and evaluation level to make sure that any time that a provider is updated, the ongoing evaluations just keep using the provider that was at the start of the transaction. And this means that once you update a provider, it only takes effect from any transactions that begin beyond that point to avoid these undesirable race conditions. And that's it.
Cool, thank you. I guess one last thing about Go, the test harness was there's a pull request open for that as well. So that will be like the end-to-end tests, which I think is basically one thing that we wanted to get in before we had the confidence that we're kind of good to go with this. And all the breaking changes for Java, Go, and .NET have already been published. So I think we're in a pretty good spot there. Those are the last like known breaking changes that we wanted to get in prior to KubeCon. And so I think we're in a pretty good spot there.
So do we need to do anything with the spec to kind of, does this change anything in the semantics of the spec, or is it just kind of an implementation detail for certain languages?
I think it's more of an implementation detail for certain languages. I mean, JavaScript doesn't even really have threading concerns. So yeah, there is kind of the the slightly wider issue of changing a provider over the course of an evaluation, which potentially like that could be applicable in the case of JavaScript, but
Yeah.
things like specifically like reordering due to lack of locking and that type of thing are only problems in threaded languages. So
But that thing of making of the evaluation context immutable, is that something that's either just undefined in the spec, whether it's mutable or not, or would it be something that we should say is encouraged so that when someone's doing this in another language, they don't run into the same issue?
Yeah, I'm hesitant because I mean, to me, the biggest issue with the mutability around things like the context or even the collections, like hooks, for example, the biggest potential issue is if it was, if while it was being enumerated, it's modified, that usually causes an exception in languages like Java and C#, for instance. So like these primitives, when you're iterating over them and then they're mutated, you'll actually get an exception thrown. And that can only happen in a situation where you have threading. So again, it's like, I feel like it's not applicable to all languages.
Right.
And it's a concern specific to those languages. I'm not against like encouraging immutability, but it seems like it's only kind of, it seems like it's only like really an emergency or like something we'd want to handle for sure in SDKs and languages that are impacted with those kinds of issues, but by those kinds of issues. But that's my take. I don't know if anyone disagrees. I wouldn't be opposed to adding some kind of encouragement to make, to consider immutability and consider threading. We could even do it in a non-normative section in the spec if we felt like it.
Yeah. But I guess you're saying it'd be more like kind of like a, advice to implementers rather than like a requirement in the spec.
And maybe that is the way to do it, because that's something that wouldn't require massive effort, and it's probably worth at least mentioning that like you want to think about thread safety, because otherwise, if we would have done that from the beginning, we probably could have avoided at least a few of the issues. And it's kind of one of those lesson learns to some extent. And so yeah, maybe just adding a quick little blurb on the spec could be helpful.
But what happens if you want to change the some data in the context, like as part of this, if someone updates their profile and that logically modifies,
like during a request, it makes someone an admin, for example, maybe a realistic scenario.
Yeah, so there's no there's no problem with changing the context at any level. You just can't do it by mutating the actual object. So you have to construct.
Oh, okay. So you'd have to like instantiate a new context or something.
In the places where it's implemented immutably, yes, yeah, that's how.
Right.
So
Okay.
like at the point that you're handing it off to a flag evaluation, you're basically like freezing it at that point.
Right. Okay. So yeah,
Which makes sense.
Although the before hooks can return a new evaluation context. So that is one way of then changing it mid evaluation.
But you can't modify it in the before hook. You have to return a new one.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and that's optional. So just
I saw
for-
Justin unmute his mic a few times. Is there something you wanted to say? Or was
Sorry,
was
go
your
ahead,
question
Justin.
addressed?
No worries. I think that like how we handle the thread safety issues are implementation dependent. I think it makes sense that we would say in a normative section, say you should consider thread safety in your implementation. And then in a non-normative section, say something along the lines of like, okay, in other SDKs, here are the areas in which thread safety was a concern. Here are the scenarios you should care about.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Todd, is that something that you can work on, please?
Yeah, I can open a PR. And I like Justin's overview. We can just kind of touch on it in vaguely, even in a normative section, and then yeah, we can expand on it if we feel like it.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else on your section, Todd? I guess you have you even really gotten into the hardening of the spec? Oh no, because you hadn't even gotten into that. So go.
That was still, yeah. If Sky's all done, I think I can go next. Okay. Yeah. So my section is pretty short and sweet. So we talked before about our goals for hardening the SDKs. I'll find a link for that after I'm done speaking and add it there. But I do have a pull request open to actually add the hardening marker to a couple sections. This pull request also makes a few changes just in terms of structuring a couple documents a little bit better. There's no actual functional changes. They're all editorial. The thing is, I do renumber some sections specifically in the provider. The provider was the only section we had that didn't have like 3 decimal places for every requirement. And it made it a little bit weird, and it also made it meant that it wasn't quite so forward compatible for adding new sections. So I changed that. So basically, some section numbers, some requirement numbers changed. That can be a bit irritating, especially for like things like the Java SDK where there's test keyed on sections. I totally don't mind being the one to fix those things. But yeah, I think the numbering is better. I also added section numbers to every single heading. Because we want to be able to add these stability markers to particular sections. And if sections aren't numbered, I feel like it's kind of vague where exactly that stability marker applies to, where it begins and ends. So all of that's kind of captured in that PR. Feel free to take a look at that. But yeah, the important part, the really important part is that the PR marks the evaluation API and the provider as hardening. So as per our earlier discussion and the other sections in the spec outlining this, that means that breaking changes from this point on to those sections require approval by the technical steering committee. We don't anticipate there's going to be any, but the whole idea is that it's going to give confidence to provider implementers and application authors that these areas aren't going to, change wildly. And that we are at the point where we can say they're stable for use in production systems. Yeah, so that's what the idea is with that. So take a look at the PR and let me know what you think. I think that's it for that section.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. All right, Pete. Yeah, some surfacing issue URL and other metadata.
Yeah, I'm kind of just the messenger here. So someone in the OpenFeature Slack was asking about this, and I kind of figured it wouldn't hurt to bring it up in the meeting. So there's a link in the show notes. There's a link in the doc here to the discussion in Slack, which I'm now following to refresh my own memory. So this is someone who I think works at Atlassian and was asking if there's a way to kind of have a field in the flag that would essentially have like an issue URL or something like that, so that if you're a developer and you're looking at the flag, you have a way of, from my understanding what they're saying, you have a way of kind of like going to like a page that describes the reason for the flag being there, or like the status of the flag, like is this like, are we rolling this out, is it fully rolled out, that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like, I think it's a good idea to have a generic kind of way of having a link to like further information. I think from a developer kind of usability perspective, that's super useful. The thing that I'm not sure about is where it fits into like OpenFeature, because I'm not sure, like at runtime, like OpenFeature is essentially like a runtime thing that's evaluating flags. And so like an engineer, the only place where an engineer is going to be kind of like would get access to this URL would be in the logs or something, I suppose, or like in an OTel span is kind of like the obvious place. So I guess I don't know. I don't know what other people's thoughts are, but like I couldn't quite figure out where this would fit into like the spec or into the SDK.
It seems like it's a concern for providers,
right,
not a concern for OpenFeature.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree, especially after kind of Pete explained, because I took a different approach to it, but I think what Pete was saying makes more sense. However, it would have to be kind of part of that contract though between a provider and the SDK. So it would be some kind of like, provider metadata or something like that. And possibly even having like kind of conventions around that if we wanted to go that route.
So I'm thinking not as a OpenFeature provider code thing, but like the people who run the service that manage the feature flags actually, that's where the URL should live. At runtime, right. I don't think you should have a URL. You should have your feature flag key, and then you go look up your feature flag key in your source of record.
I agree. The only twist that I would add is having like a defined kind of like semantic for like this is the issue URL that OpenFeature knows about and then can put into like an open telemetry span, like by default, would be really handy for like I can definitely imagine a lot of scenarios where a DevOps engineer or someone who's debugging something and they're looking in their observability platform, they see this feature flag is here, and having like a link right there in the span that takes them to the details of this flag would be extremely helpful if you're like your hair's on fire and you're trying to decide, can I turn this flag off or not? Like, I think that's a really useful use case. And so having having OpenFeature have some mechanism that will help kind of thread things from the provider through to like the observability platform, the feature flag provider through to the observability platform, I think would be super valuable. I'm not sure.
Actually, that's probably a better approach. Instead of trying to shove Jira tickets and all kinds of other stuff into here, just say like, if we could provide a link back to the flag in a particular tool, which is something that I had played around with. It's not currently possible unless it's like in some situations it is, because it's just like literally like the URL contains like the flag key or identifier, and it'd be trivial to build the URL. In other cases, it's using like, GUIDs and stuff like that we wouldn't have in the SDK. So it doesn't mean we can't do it, but it might be challenging to do, across all providers, but we could add support for it. And then as providers, have the ability to, include that information, we could certainly do it, which I think would be super helpful in like the details, because then you could use it in hooks and telemetry and dump it out to the, however you want to use it at that point.
I do. What I would worry about this potentially, maybe more for client-side SDKs from a security point of view. I don't really think that it's the domain of. I mean, I can see how that would be helpful, right? If everything's burning and you've got like a perfectly crafted link to exactly the piece of information you need, but we've had a lot of experience of people do crazy things, and I guess for server-side SDKs, maybe it's not so bad, but for client-side ones, I would be like, I wouldn't want that data going down the wire to like a browser. Like that just seems like a recipe for disaster.
I think that would be a thing for the provider to decide, right? Like the provider is the one that would be surfacing it into kind of like OpenFeature anyway. So that would be like if you're building I think having the option to do that doesn't mean that it would be have to be followed. I think I'm trying to think through whether there's some wrinkles there where like if I was making a generic like JavaScript provider, I'd have to kind of know in the provider whether I'm running in. Well, I guess I wouldn't. I would just have to. You would never even put it on the wire, right? So I think you just have the provider would just have to have enough flexibility to say like maybe I'm going to get this information if I'm running on the server, but I'm not if I'm running on the client. And so if I have it, I'll surface it, something like that.
I mean, it is interesting. Like we do have like a description field for flags that people can put things of that nature. We definitely don't send them down to the SDKs. Like we don't send that, that data down. But having said that, I could see that being potentially useful. Yeah, if you were running in a secure runtime, like on the server side. So maybe there isn't. Yeah, maybe having some sort of, I don't know, like, some sort of flexible, either a blob of text or a set of key value, like a context that the provider could push information into. That might be helpful. But my worry there, I would be worried about security. But we have like two different types of API key now. We've got like one that's meant to be public and one that's really not. So I guess if other providers have that paradigm, then that works better. But I think you're right. I think by default you wouldn't want to do that and let the provider do it if they are really certain that it's not gonna like, leak data that you don't want to leak. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Pete,
yeah,
so-
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, if you don't mind, maybe open up a issue, maybe as a research task, like in the enhancement proposal,
Yeah.
and then link it. We can chat about it there. I mean, I think it's a good idea, and probably to keep the scope at like, how do we get back to like the flag management system for this particular flag? And then everything else I would say is probably out of scope, because I think you could get all that context from like the flag management system.
Because you do have the flag identifier as well, right? Like, it's kind of more of a convenience than anything.
Yeah, but like I mentioned, not every system allows you to go directly to, because you
Yeah.
need to know the environment in some cases,
Right.
maybe
Right,
with
okay,
respect to
yeah.
a GUID. There's other
Yeah.
complexities, and it would be an optional thing, of course, to possibly even something that's disabled by default. You could enable it. And like, there's a lot of ways I think we could introduce this feature, certainly in a non-breaking way too.
I mean, the way I'll open like a research item. I think the way that I kind of putting my kind of like spec writer hat on, or spec, I don't know, whatever. Like, I'm trying to think, like, I think there's a way of doing it in a very kind of light, generic, giving some kind of very light, generic way for a provider to put metadata in that then gets surfaced into a hook that's then kind of available in a hook, right? Because that's like the two kind of like places where you need to be able to make that connection. Because if you can get the data from the provider over to the hook, so the hook can then push it into OpenTelemetry or write it to a log or whatever, then someone who's working at company X can use that capability to wire it all up, right? Like, you've just basically provided the connection.
Exactly.
So I think we could make something super generic that's nothing to do with like issue, like URLs or issues or anything, just like Justin's kind of like mentioned, like just like a bag of like key values. And then someone would write like a kind of collaborating thing where like the provider dumps in like the issue URL or the DevOps page or whatever, like the thing, and there's just like a contract between the hook and that specific hook and that specific provider that knows like this key value pair is like the thing I need to put this URL into the OpenTelemetry span or whatever. So I feel like that doing that is like a super general thing, and then if it becomes a useful thing that lots of people are using for specific things, then you can start putting some semantics and saying like, in this key value pair, this like basically the equivalent of like kind of like those kind of defined attributes in OpenTelemetry, like this specific key value pair is where the URL goes for the flag or the issue URL or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. It reminds me a lot of like the semantic convention in OTel, where you can pass in whatever you want, but then they have a system where saying like, this has specific meaning and it's meant to be used in this purpose. And I think that could work out well. So yeah, if you don't mind creating that research issue, maybe linking it in that thread and maybe more generally in the Slack channel.
Yep.
And then we can just kind of do a brain dump of ideas. But it is I think it's a breaking thing and something that we can kind of work on and certainly add, when we feel is appropriate. So
where's the right repo to put that?
Probably the OpenFeature like enhancement proposal. That's kind of been like where we've gone, like when it comes to like spec changes and stuff like that.
It's in research. It's the repo.
I think it was renamed to OFP enhancement, whatever.
Oh,
too early, I guess. I'll link it to you.
Oh yeah, it is renamed to OFEP. Yeah.
OFEP. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. And then cool. Anything else that you wanted to cover, Pete?
No, that was it.
Perfect. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess once you do have that, maybe if you could just pop it in that channel so Sean sees it. I think he's in Australia, so it's probably very unlikely he'll join any of these meetings. So we can just collaborate with him async.
Yeah.
Cool. David, looks like you're next.
Yeah, all right. So I'm bringing the fun topics. No, just kidding. So in the next, finally I'll have more time to dedicate also to OpenFeature again. And I was hoping to help set up an outreach program. And by that, I mean, even just collecting all the, speaking engagements, collecting all the different slide decks and making sure that these then are, say, visible, whether it be through social media, whether it be even just having them in some way displayed on the doc site or on the blog post section. So really driving a bit more visibility and maybe then even looking into how we can increase adoption. Obviously happy to work with whoever is open to this. If you want to write a blog post or things like that, I'm happy to work with you and help out where I can. And then, I don't know if there are any questions here, doubts, comments. All right, no, cool.
All good here. Just, I guess a quick reminder, because it's related. We do have that issue. We keep opening every 2 weeks in the community repo, I believe, where you can just add in, events that you'd like to have the OpenFeature like Twitter account mention. And so it's kind of a nice way to have those scheduled and then release. So if you maybe Thomas, once your blog is merged in, we could add that there, for example. If a provider's developed anything like that, would be nice, or speaking engagement. So just keep that in mind. It's pinned at the top of that repo, so you can go ahead and just add a little comment there. Thanks.
Yeah, and this is also to give visibility, as you just said, to all the providers in there, to make sure that everyone knows who is a part of the project and can and that it can be easily found. Then the other topic is the Bootstrap governance. I'm just bringing this up because I'm a program manager. I like to annoy people, so that's kind of in my DNA. I know Alex Jones put in his put in the candidacy. And looking forward to see if anybody else wants to volunteer. Other than that, I think then it would be nice to, whoever is present then at KubeCon, again, have a discussion about this in person, and we can make sure then to transfer this all over in some async form. That way everyone else can also be a part of the conversation. That's kind of it on my side. I don't know if you have any questions. Again, let me know. I'll also be trying to help Mike a bit more with some, let's say, infrastructure, basic enablement things. So
perfect. Thanks, David. Looks like Alex joined, so we just have to briefly recap everything.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Do you have any topics, Alex?
I guess one or two, just really like kind of boring logistical things. So I think Oleg or somebody else mentioned having some OpenFeature slide deck. That'd be kind of cool, like a reusable thing. I've got a whole bunch of things I'm going to talk about, and I'd like to have it looking like everyone else's. What else? No, I think we're making good headway. I'm excited for KubeCon, and we could talk about marketing actually a little bit. That could be kind of fun. I want to put a QR code in my talk so that I can drive people to the site. I thought, we could even look at the docs section. I was speaking also to people like James and others around, after KubeCon, I would expect to see a little spike on activity for like OpenFeature Operator and FlagD and the SDKs, client libraries. Just be really nice to make sure that before that, we've just gone through them and just double checked and make sure that all the READMEs look good. And maybe we can do kind of like a code freeze, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like in the next couple of weeks, we just say, we put down the tools and we just look at the docs and make sure that everything feels welcoming and people would be easily guided to the right stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we're in a good spot for that too. Now that we have like those last breaking changes that I was aware of, at least from the SDKs, the ones that I feel most confident with that I think will be ready by KubeCon are Java, .NET, Go, and JavaScript. So I think those are the ones we'd want to focus on and have as many providers up to date and ready to go by then. Yeah, like you mentioned, docs. are extremely important to make sure that onboarding experience makes sense. The initial impressions all make sense. So yeah, if people have time to kind of review the happy paths, and if you have feedback, certainly let us know. And now's a good time to do it. And then for a QR code, I was also working on my slide deck as well. I don't know if it's yeah, maybe we just want to create like a QR code that we can share potentially. One of the tools that I found has kind of pretty looking QR codes, and it also does like scan tracking, which may or may not be attractive, but kind of an interesting potential option there as well. But it's kind of cool because you can have like the logo in there, and it's kind of more bubbly looking QR codes and stuff like that. So a couple options that we could share, and then maybe we could make available to anyone that wants to use that type of stuff. So, was there anything else that I missed? I mean, I think that's all good. I think that, I'm totally on board.
One question, in terms of like tracking analytics, page views, the docs. I know some SDKs languages, it's easier to track activity, downloads and things like that than others. Like Java, it's not really possible as far as I'm aware. Like, is that done? And like, is there like some sort of analytics tracking on the documentation side, for example?
So we do not have Google Analytics or anything set up, although we probably could and maybe should. It's something that like even the CNCF would like access to. It's something I've been, not reluctant to do. It's just one of those things, like I only want to do it if we're going to use the data. And so, I mean, if there's demand, for sure, I think we can go ahead and add that stuff to the docs. So it's not currently there though. And in terms of downloads of the SDKs, I mean, we haven't really talked about it. I mean, I would, for like, NPM, for example, you see downloads, same thing with like, containers in the GitHub container registry, things like that. That would be the only way to track it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so Google Analytics, I know sometimes in this sort of context, sometimes feels almost a bit grubby, but it's just if there's like energy being spent trying to get people to, the GitHub repositories and the documentation and stuff, then if you don't have it, you're never gonna have that data, right? Like, so there might be things in there in terms of, I don't know, where people are coming from or referrers or things like that. Like, I every couple of weeks I look at our larger GitHub repos and see where GitHub's so frustrating because they show you that data and you can't track it and then it goes. So you have to do it regularly to see, like, sometimes we get, I don't know, someone's written about us on a Reddit post that we didn't know about, and we only found out about it because it was in our GitHub referrers kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I do. One is I have Google Alerts set up personally, which if you're really interested in the project, you can set up, and it's kind of nice because you'll get alerted for even like a big Hacker News article, for instance, if it gets popular. So that's not a bad thing to do on a personal level. As far as downloads, OSSRH does actually work for the Java. So you don't publish directly to Maven Central, but it's kind of annoying. But you publish to a smaller repo that mirrors into Maven Central on job, and that smaller repo does get information pushed to it, or it kind of has some way to track the download. So it's just not public, but we can use a shared credential to actually look at our download statistics in Java. It's public in NPM. I don't know about Go, but it might not be a bad idea to kind of centralize this data somewhere.
Yes, I wasn't aware about that with Java. That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I know like it's been useful for us, like just the NPM traffic and stuff. That's been useful to see as a vanity exercise, if anything else,
Yeah, the other thing that this reminded me of is currently when we're registered on that CNCF landscape page, I had to point to a single repo. I chose the community repo, which, because of just the state of it right now, it doesn't have a ton of activity from commits or necessarily stars. So it's one of those things. So I think we should try to add some more activity in there where possible without, forcing it. But also if you don't mind like starring that repo, because that's kind of the one that people see when they go look at it on the CNCF landscape. So yeah, just a quick aside, that could be a bit concerning if you go there and you see like the commit activity kind of drop off because we haven't been super active in that repo, and then obviously like we haven't pushed people towards like starring it necessarily, which is one of the metrics, I guess, in GitHub at least. So it would be handy if we could keep that in mind as we're working. Perfect. It looks like that's everything on the list. Does anyone else have any last minute topics? Perfect. All right. Well, the next couple of weeks will be pretty exciting, I would say. So a lot going on. So yeah.
So just regarding that quickly, Michael, have we organized a meetup as a team?
A meetup in Detroit?
At KubeCon, yeah. Like maybe we could just put some, ideas for a time and a place at KubeCon and do a little unofficial office hours or something.
Yeah, I have a sign up form too. So I know you're going to be there, so you can sign up if you want, or don't worry about it because I know you're going to be there. But we do have a few options. We also have the booth that will be, that's in the middle of the day. There's also that Cube cruise that we can meet up at, and then certainly it's probably a good idea to, if people are available and willing, we could meet up either at the event space or even at the Dynatrace office because it's within walking distance of the event.
In the Dynatrace office, to be clear.
What did I say? No.
I thought you just said office, but
Oh no, yeah, sorry, the Dynatrace office. Cool. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. We should definitely use the opportunity to meet up. There are a few things I think that are already scheduled, but any dedicated sessions, I'm certainly more than happy to meet up or try to coordinate. So just look for Todd's silver hair. That's perfect.
Nice. It would actually kind of cool that we do it at the Dynatrace offices, because then we can include people who aren't at the event. So I think that would be nice.
Yeah, that's true actually. So I can work on that. It should be easy to get approval, and it is kind of cool because the office is in an NFL stadium, so it's kind of a unique experience to walk in through like the main gate, and you can see the field and all that stuff, and then you head up to the office. So the office itself is not that exciting, but the experience of getting in is kind of cool. So
awesome.
All right. Anything else? All right, guys. Yeah, appreciate the time. Have a nice day.
Thanks, so.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right. Bye.